Hi, this is Sue Ann. Welcome back to Gravy Days. I was thinking today about what little gravy bite I could leave here, and what came to mind was something about how and maybe you can relate to this too, I just really need alone time. These days, I live by myself, and so there's not the need that there was before. But when I was raising five children in a busy household, oh my goodness, yes, I needed downtime. I think I've just kind of always been that kind of person that needed just a break, you know, and you understand that, I'm sure. What happened to me years ago was an interesting story about how I developed some of that time when it didn't look like I was going to get any. Where there were five children, I had a husband who was busy and gone most of the time, and I could feel this volcanic pressure rising up inside of me, and I should have handled it maybe long before I did, but I felt it coming on. I knew it meant one thing, and that was that I needed to go away for a while, and since it didn't look like I was going to be able to enjoy a hot beach with sand between my toes anytime soon, I needed to maybe settle for a night at the Comfort Inn. So that was what I wanted to do. But there was a catch. And that was that I didn't have any money. My credit card was maxed out, and it was 4 days till payday, and I wasn't sure what to do. I just knew I had to do something because I was going to be crazy if I didn't. So I decided to ask my oldest son, who had just sort of secured his first full-time work, and it was kind of a big deal for him. And he'd just been paid, and it is a big deal for any of us. And he was super excited about this work and getting paid for it. And so I knew he had money. Well, I asked him to come down to the kitchen where I could talk to him for a minute. And I said, I had kind of a wild-eyed, feral look about me, that I'm sure was a little concerning to him. And I said, I need to borrow some money from you. And he said, oh, why? And I said, I can't tell you right now, but if you will just do that for me today, I could pay you back on Tuesday. And he said, well, and then he kind of came up to me with a kind of a parental glint in his eye and said, Mom, do you need the money for drugs? And I thought, okay, I need to tell him what's going on. I didn't want to tell him originally because I didn't want that someone to tell me how ridiculous I was being, or that, oh, calm down, go in your room and shut the door. No, it wasn't like that. It was something different. So I did. I told him sometimes moms or dads have to get away. And I said, this is one of those days for me, and I just need to do this. And he said, how much do you need? And I said, $100. And now this was way back in the day when, you could get a motel room for a decent price. And so anyway, he said, okay. And he kind of disappeared upstairs into his room, and then he came down and he had one crisp $100 bill in his hands. And he said, okay. He said, this is for you. But he said, I want you to know that when you return it to me, I want it to be a $100 bill. I don't want 5 20s. I don't want 2 50s. I want one $100 bill. And I said, absolutely. I was happy to meet his price. So after, arranging everything with everybody like you do when you have children in varied ages and different areas of commitment in their lives, I was finally able to leave, and I left and went to the grocery store, where I immediately bought a quart of non-fat milk, a box of Mystic Mints. I don't know if you remember those or not, but man, were they good. Ooh, bought a whole box of those. And then 2 magazines and a newspaper, back when everybody read newspapers. You can tell how long ago this was. So I got in my car and I drove directly over to the Comfort Inn, where I paid for a room on the second floor for one night. And I went in and shut the door and got to be alone for 17 hours. Because I had to be back at, I can't remember what time, fairly early the next morning, because my husband would be there, but he was had to be somewhere else in the morning. And so I assured him that I would be back in time. But for 17 hours, I laid in that room. I watched whatever I wanted on TV. I read my magazines, the newspaper. I engulfed the box of biscuit mints. That was dinner that way. Of course it was. And I laughed and I cried and I prayed and I did all those things that you do when you're alone. And then went to sleep with the sound of rain against the window, and it was an amazing experience. Got up the next day, went home directly to my little family, and was brand new, brand shiny new. Felt it was all I needed. It was the break I needed at that moment, when I couldn't get what I really wanted, which was to go to the beach. Couldn't get that, but I got this instead. So I guess the point I want to make here is this. If there is any point to be made, that's just kind of a silly little story from my life, but the point might be, don't let the volcano erupt before you do something about it. If you're someone who needs alone time, and even now, when I live alone but I spend time with people periodically, in groups of people, I feel like I'm ready to get back to my quiet space. And whenever I feel the volcano rising within me, it doesn't happen very often anymore, but whenever I do, I realize I need to do something about that. Now, not everybody's like that, but you know what? It's okay if you are. And it took me a lot of years to accept that about myself. But I did, and I'm so grateful I was able to, and I'm so grateful to my son that day, because I like to think that he believed me when I told him that he really saved me that day, that he bailed me out. And that next Tuesday, I brought him a crisp $100 bill and handed it to him, and I said, "Thank you for that. Thank you." And we were all good. Anyway, find a way, if you need to be alone, a way that you can be, even if it means being extreme, even if it means doing something that you're not crazy about doing, which in my case was borrowing money from my son. But it's important for you. So just a little bite of gravy today, something to gnaw on, to think about your own situation and your own life. See you next time.